just a little bit, we're going to have a special guest with us who's going to be joining us shortly. And but before I get into that, again, I want to thank you. We're going to be getting some more video clips out there on Facebook. We have over 100 followers now, so they're letting us do that. It's nice to have their permission, and we appreciate that immensely. So if you're enjoying the program, and you know there's others that might want to begin to understand a little bit about what it is to walk in Christ, and then not only live that in the public life, but live that in the political influence life. Sometimes that's in your own house, just how your house operates. Other times that's at the local level in cities, and then also in counties, and also in states, and then on to the federal. And we had that conversation because I think we've been long comfortable with who we are as a people and haven't felt it's necessary. And usually when a giant boat gets punctured in the hole, suddenly everybody realizes this is necessary. So keeping an eye on our country, keeping an eye on our state, and we're going to be specific with that today, and keeping an eye on the condition of your own heart. Very important through all of this. It's not always easy to navigate, but glory to God, because of who He is and His saving power by His Holy Spirit. You can, if you love truth, let God's word navigate you. Let the Spirit of God navigate you in all these things. And that's super important. That's uber important. So you can find us on Rumble. You can find us at YouTube. And you can come over and find out what the ministry is doing, because we mix and match, and we get the kickback, and that's all right. People don't understand how it is that we do a church, we do a ministry, we do all kinds of outreach with that. But we also have this podcast that speaks very specifically to many different conditions, being medical, being political, and keeping an eye on the country. And I feel like people are being alerted to that. And I'm meeting a lot of people who are already vested long before I got here, long before we got here. There's a lot of people that's got a hold of this. It's taken me a while. But also a lot of people are going, tell me about this. How does this work? How does this apply in my church? How does this apply on Sunday morning? How does this apply at men's group? And so we talk about a lot of that stuff there today, here on every one of the podcasts when we can, as much as we can. So like and follow us. You can share us. You can find us on Facebook, the podcast, the Challenge Podcast with John Chapman. You can find us on Facebook there. And you can also go to White Dove Ministries, whitedoveministries.net. And that's the umbrella that we sail underneath. And you can find out how to be a part of this, find out what more the Lord is doing there. And you can even support what the ministry is doing if you like. And we do that. We are not going to go monetary support, and we're certainly not going to borrow or receive money from the government to get this done either, because we like being able to say exactly what it is we want to say. True story, absolutely true story. If you have been following at all, well, let me just let the cat out of the bag first, because joining us is going to be Jacob Hall of the Iowa Standard today. And if you follow him at all in the state of Iowa, and I recommend that, and you can follow him at theiowastandard.com. He has an interesting analysis going on right now. The Republican Party is, I think, at a saturation point in this state. And we can ponder where we're at, and we can say, the Republican Party has had a super majority of Republican control in the state house for some time now. And we might get lazy and go, when I say we, I mean conservative idealism, not even necessarily the Republicans, because they've got enough things of their own they're going to have to figure out. And I think we're seeing some problems with that. We might be able to, the Bible says we're not supposed to compare ourselves one to another. And I think this applies in so many things. So we ought not, as Iowans, look up to Minnesota and go, well, at least we're not Minnesota. We ought not, as Iowans, look to Illinois and go, well, thank God, at least we're not Illinois. We ought not, as Iowans, look to New York and go, well, thank God we're not like New York. And we ought not look at California. I'm picking the top ones in all this. We ought not look at those states and go, well, at least we're not like them. That is a recipe for problems. And maybe Iowa's been sailing under that banner for a while, because what we're seeing happen now, Governor Kim Reynolds has already, last year, she announced she's going to step down. She's going to be done being the governor. And we now have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 Republicans running for governor. And that's a lot in a state to go to battle to figure out who's going to be the person that gets on the ballot, who's going to be the person that we are going to come together and decide whether or not we're going to vote for them. And I'm not going to lie, if you follow the Democrat Party right now, and I didn't look this up, so you're going to have to find it yourself. Sorry about this. Rob Sand and maybe I'll be able to find it later. One other gal was running for the Democrat Party, but you never heard of her. You only heard of Rob Sand. And so Rob Sand has been promoted. He's getting around. People know who he is. He's been the state auditor for Iowa for some time. And I don't hear much complaints about that. I think he's done quite a reasonable job from that standpoint, from what I know. And seems like a very personable guy. And they're coming in at a time where Iowa's been so saturated with capacity to do things that I believe conservatism brings to the table. And maybe I would even go so far to say we have been super saturated with power and authority, so much so we're timid about it. And so it actually starts to grate me the wrong way a little bit, because as a Christian, there's still things I think we're not far enough into the scripturally on. I think there's things that we're too apologetic about. And I think there's things that we are not coming strong enough biblically based. And we're starting to play the games of anti-constitutional type freedom so that we can get along. And you start to see that. And the problem is when you have majorities in the House, the Senate, and the governor's a Republican, you start to get the differences of all those opinions from within, creating conflict. I think we have been at that state for a while. And it seems to me the potential, at least, for the Conservative Party of Iowa is to become, I don't know, when you've had power for so long, you start to miss where your problems are. I think you lose contact with your base. For sure, I think you start losing contact with solid biblical foundation believers, Christians. And you start to step over the fence, you start to jump ship, you start to do other things that maybe compromise that. And I'm not going to lie, in the United States of America, this republic, the process of democracy, then it's smart the way we do it here. And as a result of that, I think there comes a time when the shrubs get so big that they have to be trimmed back. And maybe we're looking at that. I don't know. Because there's things I can get on board with, Adam Steen. There's things I can get on board with, Brad Sherman. There's things I can get on board with Eddie Andrews. And I've yet to meet Zach Lamb, but I've heard him speak. And there's things I'm on board with him. And I've heard one interview with Andy Feenstra. And I have to say, I don't know. I'm concerned. And so with that being said, this is the condition we're in right now. And I think because Iowa has been in a supermajority for so long, I think it's created the risk factor that we're in. But better people have a better analysis of what's going on than I do. And I would like to say thank you, Jacob Hall, for joining us today, man.
Thanks for having me, John. I appreciate it. It was a very hectic morning at the Capitol. They had nomination petition challenge hearings for 5 people who filed to run for office, one of them being Eddie Andrews.
Oh, yeah.
Who's running for governor. And my entire day has been consumed with stuff that I didn't necessarily anticipate. And we actually have this weird period now where we're in a holding pattern, and they're going to resume the hearing regarding Eddie's petitions tomorrow at 8 a.m. So he may or may not be on the primary ballot in June.
This morning?
This happened this morning at 10:30. It started, and Eddie's hearing alone took well over an hour. They recessed, and then they came back and they said, we're going to kind of hit the pause button. We'll come back at 8 a.m. and try to figure this out.
All right. What's brought us By the way, thanks for making it anyway. I mean, you get stuck in the jungle zoo down there.
Yep.
And quite frankly, we're all glad you're there and we're not. Um, and yet did you put the machete away? Did we clean that for you when you got here and you got out of there? We got some time here to chat about this. How did we get to where we're at now with as many Republicans we have in the primary? But now, I mean, the last of all people, you go, well, Eddie Andrews, and I saw this. You reported this morning on your Facebook, and I'm like, wait, what?
So it's super interesting because Eddie will tell you that he had a number of his petitions disappear.
No.
Yeah, right before the filing deadline, Eddie missed 3 days in a row at the legislature, which is really rare for him.
Yeah.
And that's because he was on the road trying to collect the number of signatures needed to get on the ballot. In the state of Iowa, if you run for statewide office, you need so many signatures, and you need to have at least 100 from each county from like 20 different counties. And Eddie's
minimum 20 counties, 100
minimum
of
20,
each one of those, but you don't need 100 from all 99.
No.
Okay.
So Eddie basically had some counties where he had over 100, but not so many that if you take away some duplicates or you take away some incomplete addresses, all of a sudden that 105 goes down to 95. And that's where he's in trouble. And we're kind of in limbo right now, waiting to find out what the panel will decide on whether he stays as a choice on the primary ballot or not. It's really interesting. There's a lot of behind the scenes drama that's unfolding with this because, as I understand it, the individual who filed the challenge to Eddie's signatures was a donor to one of his competitors. So naturally, the connection that people are going to make is the challenge is coming from one of the opposing campaigns. And, you know, anybody can file a challenge in the state of Iowa. It doesn't have to be anybody with a campaign, but certainly in politics, perception is reality. And when one of your donors files a challenge against one of your opponents, people, right or wrong, are going to run with it and make allegations that may be true, may be false.
Since you've been following our candidates, and where is Eddie, for example, kind of been polling in the running?
I really hate to offer opinions on this because they're just opinions. But Eddie, I would say, has probably struggled the most to gain support, even though I think if you were voting based on who you like, Eddie probably wins going away. A lot of people like Eddie. Even if they're not going to vote for Eddie, a lot of people like Eddie. But if I had to wager, I would guess he's probably down there between 3 and 5%. That doesn't mean that's where he is. That's just kind of what my gut feeling, how I see things shaping up are. And it doesn't mean that, you know, between now and June, nothing can change, because I think Eddie has an incredibly compelling case to make that he's won in a blue district. He can bring people together. I think that's obvious. And I think that's what you're going to need against Rob Sand. But for whatever reason, I don't think he's been able to captivate the support necessary to kind of establish himself as a front runner. So it's an interesting strategy to try and have Eddie removed from the ballot. But, you know, as they say in dodgeball, that's a bold strategy, Cotton. Let's see if it works out for him.
and I guess we will see.
We will.
I mean, this is a product. When is the last time? See, this is, you know, and you've known us, and I'm just wading into the waters. It's been a couple of years now, and I feel like I'm almost up to my long swimming trunks and understanding what's going on. Maybe.
Yeah.
Is it always this, or similarly, are we always dealing with having so many trying to become a governor during a primary, as we do right now, 5? Is that common, uncommon?
No, I think it's probably about right. You probably have a couple dark horse long shot candidates, which I would argue right now are Brad Sherman and Eddie Andrews. And then you have an establishment darling favorite, which is Randy Feenstra. And then you have a couple people who are trying to build enough of a niche or a following from that conservative base. And that, in my opinion, right now is Adam Steen and Zach Lane. So it's not necessarily uncommon. It's just that Iowa never changes governors. So when Kim Reynolds decided not to run again, it opened up an opportunity that I don't think a lot of people anticipated. I think there are people who aren't running for governor in the Republican Party that would have been outstanding candidates, and our field of 5, if they chose to run, is probably a field of 2 or 3.
Okay.
But they chose not to run this time for various reasons, family, business, things like that. It just wasn't their time. And now voters have a choice of 4 or 5, depending on what happens with Eddie here. It's not uncommon for basically Democrats to challenge Democrat petitions and Republicans to challenge Republican petitions, because it's one way to eliminate your competition without having to beat them in an election. You just challenge their petitions and you can get them off the ballot like that.
I believe it was last week I heard on the news that on the Democrat, I'm going to jump off the Republican Party here for just a second, that the Democrat Party, everybody already knows who Rob Sand is, but nobody had ever heard of who the other Democrat runner was. And I don't even remember her name. That's how terrible it is. Right. And so the news reported that there were some indiscrepancies that came up with hers, and she no longer gets to be a candidate either.
Yeah.
And so it was announced that Rob Sand is the sole runner from the Democrat Party. And I don't, why don't we see 5 varying and solid Democrat candidates when our current governor is resigning? To me, that would create some sort of a black hole vacuum of many, many, many people on both sides trying to get in on that action.
I mean, I think the reality is the Democrat Party in Iowa is weak, and they haven't really held any power in Iowa for a decade. We've had a full Republican control for 10 years. So in order to have a deep bench, you have to have a bench, and Democrats haven't had a bench in Iowa for a long time. I mean, if you look at a lot of their races, I don't think they have a competitive primary for very many congressional seats. I think the only competitive primary that I kind of view them as having is in the U.S. Senate race between Zach Walz and Josh Turek. And that's pretty much it in terms of competitive Democrat primaries statewide or congressionally in the state of Iowa. I don't think I'm forgetting any. I think maybe Christina Bohannon and Josh Terrell in the Miller-Minx's district. I think that may be slightly competitive, but I mean, when you have a lack of elected officials who are Democrats, then you're just not going to have that many to pick from. And there, it's a big advantage. I mean, let's not pretend Rob Sand is not at a big advantage here, because he doesn't have to spend money to win a primary. I mean, the primary's wrapped up, whereas these Republicans are going to have to spend something if they want to win.
I mean, you've got Randy Feenstra coming down the Capitol pipeline. Some would argue that's the sewage disposal. And this is interesting to me, because as I follow, Randy Feenstra still seems to be strong. But because I've vested myself in meeting the other candidates, I don't understand why.
Yep.
Do you have a thought on why is that for us with Iowans? I mean, here's the grassroots guys, and here's the guy from the top swinging down in to play. What's difficult about being an Iowan at finding out or understanding or being willing to find out what's going on at the grassroots level with your with us already guys versus your Randy Feensters?
Yeah, I mean, I think the key is, in politics, you have lanes. And Randy Feenstra has that moderate establishment Republican lane all to himself. Adam Steen, Brad Sherman, Eddie Andrews, Zach Lane, none of them are competing or vying for the moderate vote. And that makes sense because Randy Feenstra already has it. So in essence, you're almost, I don't want to say submitting or giving up, but you're acknowledging, like, Randy Feenstra has that lane. There's no sense in competing for that. Perhaps because those voters aren't going to ideologically align anyway. So why pretend to be something you're not? So then the other guys are having to duke it out to emerge as that anti-Feenstra, anti-establishment candidate. And the only way to do that is through conservative grassroots support.
Right. And that's what's going to cost.
Right.
More time, more travel, ads at some point. They're going to start firing up.
And that's the thing, is you got so many people who will vote simply based on who have they heard on the radio the most, who have they seen on TV the most, and who felt so strongly to send them so many pieces of love letters through the mail, that's who they want to vote for. Now, on the flip side, you might have some people who choose to vote against the person that sends them the most mail because they hate it. But by and large, I think it's more an indictment of the electorate that we are so, I don't know any other word for this, and I don't mean to offend anybody, lazy, that we don't get involved until, May, and we really don't spend too much time digging into somebody's record. We just listen to what they have to tell us come election time, assume they're being honest with us, and we make our decision based on that.
I've been that guy, right? I wait till I'm handed somebody, and then I go vote.
Right.
And I feel like I'm doing my responsibility. And if you give 10 minutes a week to finding out what's actually going on, reading a little and looking into this, you realize that all of a sudden, I'm not sure if I want to take on that kind of responsibility.
Right.
And then you find out that it takes something more. It takes something more of us as anybody, but it takes something more of us as believers.
Yeah.
And my criticism against the church, Christians and believers, myself, because I've had to have the kick in the pants. Where am I willing? I sit back and go, well, you know what? This is how I get out to get involved in stuff like this, or even having an opinion. God is in control, Jacob.
Yep.
And he's sovereign. So what is.
Right.
It's going to be what's going to be. It's going to happen how it's going to happen. And that's not operating by faith. To me, that at some level, that's faith without works.
Right.
Now, I'm not telling people how to vote. I'm not even telling people what to do when they get into the booth. What they write down there, that's hardly that. But to have zero know or knowing or understanding, then that creates where we're at with this lazy crowd. Now, and the church is equally those people.
Yeah.
And they have a tendency to either be so radical people can't stand them, or they're so uninvolved because we're so we're so blessed.
Yeah.
We're just so blessed, right? So that's all there is. We're blessed. Well, right now, this is looking a little bit different. And I don't know. I don't know what's going to take for Iowa to at least see or how this is going to operate. This is my opinion. And I want to hear your thoughts on this. Rob Sand is personable enough. He's almost like the white Eddie Andrews. And people can listen to him and he is just chatting.
Yeah.
So think, okay. Yeah. He said some things. I'm like, I appreciate that. And that's not me.
Right.
I'm that's not me. So you have that factor. And is Iowa, I don't want to say at risk, but are we at risk of throwing this thing in the trash because we end up chewing up each other so much we really come up with a bad candidate out of 5 to try to have the governorship?
Yeah, I think Rob Sand, I talked with him today after the nomination petition hearings, and he is like extremely personable, comes across very reasonable, and I mean, he's even publicly taken stands against some of the more radical Democrat positions. Now, whether that's how he would govern or not, obviously remains to be seen because the auditor doesn't set a lot of policies as it relates to those issues.
Right.
But I would say, just from the perspective of a sports fan, the reality is Rob Sand won the auditor's race in 2022 because Republicans let him. Republicans completely cast aside Todd Halber, who was the nominee for auditor. They did not give him any money. They did not allow him to campaign with the rest of the statewide ticket, Kim Reynolds on down. And Rob Sand won by a couple thousand votes statewide. So
it's still narrow, fairly.
Yeah. So it's kind of one of those things where, when you're an NFL team, you have your division wrapped up, you're playing an opponent who's in your division that last week who needs to win to go to the playoffs. You rest your starters because the game means nothing to you. They win, and then you meet in the playoffs, and all of a sudden it's like, ooh, you let them linger, and now they're going to bite you.
Right.
And, Republicans let Rob Sand win the auditor's race in 2022, and I think there's a chance that it's just like karma that he's going to come back now and win the governor's race in 2026. Whether that happens remains to be seen. It's not supposed to happen because we have such a huge voter registration advantage as Republicans in the state of Iowa. But would I be shocked? Absolutely not. And the scary thing is, if Randy Feenstra's at the top of the ticket, I think what that does is it depresses the turnout in Zach Nunn's House district and Marionette Miller Meeks' House district, and whether she or David Pouch is the nominee there. I think there's a chance that if Randy Feenster's at the top of the ticket, not only do we lose the governor's race, but Zach Nunn and Miller Meeks' seat goes from Republican to Democrat. And if that happens, there's a pretty good chance Democrats control the United States House of Representatives. So the governor's race in Iowa actually may impact national politics.
Right. Which is something we have to wrap our mind around. When we're here and we're questioning governors, future governors, and we're asking those questions, what is your take on where your stance is on some federal policies? Because that's a direct connect there. And you can't say, well, I'm thinking about Iowans first, because you're having chats with the federal government. And when the money's trickling down from there, that's very much so an impact that happens. And a reality I think we need to wake up to a little bit. So we've had the supermajority. You said for a decade. A decade. Has there been enough time gone by that there are a few conservatives that are so conservative, perhaps like myself, who would go, "You're going to embitter me by getting the Randy Feenstra there"? And is what person is going to walk away from? I don't know. It's just tough listening to. Okay, here's my analogy. Trump, quote unquote, lost an election a few years ago. And Biden, a guy that nobody knows, won.
I recall.
Yeah. It was an interesting day in history for us.
Yep.
And Biden didn't come out to play. As far as I know, he was doing video games. Biden didn't show up. Biden didn't speak. Biden didn't talk. He didn't say anything substantive, but people talked a lot about him, and the news press spoke about him. And it happened, man. It just happened. And are we too comfortable that something like this needs to shake us a little bit? And how do we tell people, look, you need to wake up in this? Because if Randy Feenstra, who doesn't, now I'm trying to follow him on Facebook sometimes. I'm trying to see what he's doing, and I see the pictures. Hey, I know he eats pizza. I get that.
He's tall.
He's tall and eats pizza, but he's not saying anything else. Like he's taking away the ability to also say, hey, you've done this and this and this and this, and that's a problem. He's just kind of going, this is all good. I'm blessed.
Yeah. I think what you're hitting on is what I've been telling people privately kind of is Republicans have had full control in this state for 10 years. And the front runner is campaigning from a place of fear, saying we can't let extreme liberal Rob Sand turn Iowa into Illinois. Now, wait a minute. You've had control for 10 years. Why are you not campaigning on the accomplishments of the last 10 years? And that should be pretty easy. Because Republicans have done a lot of good things in the last 10 years. Yeah. Now, I would argue they haven't done near enough. And I would argue this is the worst year they've had legislatively because they're too busy legislating out of fear of losing seats or fear of losing the governorship. And they're forgetting, to get elected, you got to give the people a reason to vote for you. And they're doing a lot of limp-wristed legislating this session. And it's not working well. And it's depressing that conservative voter who you talked about. Yeah. And that is going to be interesting to see how it happens in November, because right now they're not giving us a whole lot of reasons to go vote for them. They're only giving us reasons to vote against Democrats.
Right.
And I don't know that message is going to work this time around for those independent, no party. Rob Sand turned in a record 24,700 some signatures, 10% of which he claims are from Republicans.
I've heard his claim.
Right.
Yeah, I'm sorry. My hair's still peeling off from when you made that analogy about how can somebody run on a campaign of we can't be like Illinois, we can't let him win. And we'll sit back all day as conservatives and go, I hate it when the Democrats fearmonger. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I hate it when they throw fear in there to try to motivate us. Well, wake up, Republicans. Right. Yeah. No, seriously, right? No, Republicans, wake up. Yeah. When you hear that and the fear mongering comes from there, it doesn't mean that we're the righteous ones, so therefore we get to instigate the fear. There's nothing there. And we need to come to some substantive understanding of that. Yeah. And
there's no reason to run away from your record as a Republican, because your record has gotten you reelected five times over now the last decade as a Republican in Iowa.
Yeah.
Tell the people. you know what? You might not like vouchers, education savings accounts, but obviously voters in Iowa like them because they keep reelecting the people who passed them because they want to give parents parental rights in education. And you can do that with every issue that you've been successful on. You just have to embrace those issues and not run away from them. No matter what your polling shows today on these different issues, the reality is polling that's more important was the 2024 general election, the 2022 general election, the last 5 general elections that have all ended with Republicans controlling the Iowa House, the Iowa Senate, and the governorship. Obviously, Iowans love what Republicans are doing because they keep electing them to do it more.
Right, right.
That should be the message, not, oh boy, we've had 10 years of full Republican control, and if Rob Sand wins, he's going to turn Iowa into Illinois.
Right, right. Which we should be looking at and saying, how could that even possibly happen?
Yeah.
Because of what we've been doing.
And Republicans, even if Rob Sand wins, he acknowledges the Republicans are going to control the legislature. So even if Rob Sand wins the governorship, he'll only be able to do as much damage as the Republicans and the legislature let him.
Right. Let me track back a little bit to what's going on right now within the Republican Party as far as these primaries go.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, this starts. Brad Sherman is the first to announce, and then everybody else starts to trickle in.
Mm-hmm.
When I think about these 5 guys going, at some point I thought, you know what, at some point they're going to have to turn the gun on one another.
Mm-hmm.
I don't like that because it should strengthen us for them to simply start having greater vision about why they're running and then lose accordingly, right? You stick to your guns. You go, this is who I am. This is what I believe. Many of them don't have voting records
Right.
to even run on at that point. This is who I am. This is what I believe. If you believe in that, vote for me.
Yep.
And I always get disappointed where at some point all the wonderful people that are just, righteous in Christ, we love the Lord so much, we're doing it His way, that we have to turn on each other. Is there no avoiding that?
Unfortunately, after I just went on a rant about giving people reasons to vote for you instead of reasons to vote against your opponent, it's obvious that negative campaigning works because everybody does it. If it didn't work, people wouldn't do it.
Yeah.
But I think with this field and this unique situation, they would be wise to recognize Brad Sherman is not running against Eddie Andrews. He's not running against Adam Steen. He's not running against Zach Lane. Randy Feenstra is the favorite. And I know people will say, where do you see his support? It's just like, I don't want to say it's basic common sense because I don't want to insult anybody, but it's just obvious. Like, look at the money, which, whether we like it or not, influences political races.
Right.
He's got the money. He's got the name ID. He has the experience. That just is what it is. So in my opinion, the way that these guys should approach it is, I'm Brad Sherman. I hope you like what Brad Sherman stands for. But if you align more with Zach Lane or Adam Steen or Eddie Andrews, I understand that. But there's a guy in this race who's never showing up. And I don't understand how you could vote for him. And they need to make it completely about him, because ultimately, Randy Feenstra, if he can go through this primary without doing debates, without having to pretend like these other candidates are on equal footing as he is, that's going to make him a weaker general election candidate, not a stronger one.
Yeah.
We saw what happened when Democrats made Kamala Harris their nominee without her having to campaign at all. Didn't go very well.
No.
So I really think what comes across as criticisms of Randy Feenstra, I would actually argue are ways to help him, constructive criticism.
Right.
To try to make him a better candidate for November, because if he is the nominee, 98% of the people who vote for somebody other than Randy Feenstra in June are going to want him to win in November if he's the nominee. But a weak Randy Feenstra doesn't help anybody in November. So I don't think those guys are going to turn the guns on each other. But I will tell you, and I don't know that I've said this much publicly yet, I will tell you that what happened today with the nomination petition hearings, with the rumor allegation that, it's this donor who donated to Adam Steen's campaign and then he challenged Eddie Andrews' petitions. That creates hard feelings. And there's already hard feelings between Brad Sherman's camp and Adam Steen's over the Satanic Temple issue that was at the Capitol.
Right.
And there's hard feelings, I know, from Eddie Andrews with the Adam Steen campaign, just because of different things that are said on the campaign trail. And these little things fester among the grassroots people, like grassroots people. 90% of the people that are going to vote in June have no idea what I'm talking about.
Right.
But these fester with the grassroots people, and that stuff does need to get worked out. And it is going to happen because it is a competition. And when Randy Feenstra doesn't show up, you feel like you're only competing against the ones who are showing up. They would be wise to remember, if they want to run against each other, the reality is they're running for second place. Like Randy Feenstra is the guy they have to beat.
Right. Not each other in that sense.
And I do think that's going to help. Okay, you're getting some breaking news because I haven't said this publicly. I do think right now, Zach Lane's campaign is the best positioned to keep their hands clean, be above board, because obviously people are going to say Adam Steen's campaign challenged Eddie's paperwork. Eddie may get knocked out. And then Brad Sherman's supporters have been very aggressive on social media in their support of Brad Sherman. Right, wrong, or indifferent. I'm not criticizing them, but the reality is a lot of people on social media are turned off by that. They may not like the person that they're criticizing, but if they do it in a way that is kind of like in your face, offensive, loud, rude, that's going to turn them off to your guy too. And that's where I think that's where I think Zach Lane has a lane to be the anti-Feenstra choice.
What does everyday Joe voter like me need to do better in picking?
I think the important thing is ignore what they are telling you now and look at what they have done while in office, because it's really easy for them to tell you what you want to hear to get your vote, because every politician can seem really sincere and like they really care.
I'd vote for you right now.
I know. Every single one can seem that way. But the reality is, okay, what are you doing when you don't think we're paying attention? What is your voting record? And that's where Randy Feenstra has failed with conservatives, like just utterly failed. Now, like you said, Adam Steen and Zach Lane don't have a voting record. So how can you judge them? Now you are going to have to kind of go off of okay, let me look at their framework of what they've done professionally. Let me see what they're telling me. Let me see if I can make that match up. And then for Eddie Andrews and Brad Sherman, I mean, I would argue in terms of records and rhetoric, like they align with what they're saying 100%.
Right.
Like I have no concerns with them at all. So the average voter has to figure out what they want in their next governor, who exemplifies that, who exemplified it before they were running for governor. And then, do they trust that person to be that same person once they are in office? And it's hard when people are telling you exactly what you want to hear. It's really hard.
I don't know if this is a fair comparison or not, but I think it has to be looked at. And I appreciate that analysis because people have to know what to do to get there. The couple of times that I was on the mission field, and again, we're faith people have a tendency to look to the wind, throw the dust up in it, and watch where it goes. And I get that. Right? You don't know which way the wind blows. God's going to do that and follow that. And I get that. And I think if we apply that too much in these situations, then it's our faith without works. And when we went on the mission field, I'm going to tell you, we did praying like I usually don't do in my life. Right? You're going to a foreign country, they're probably going to hate you. We went into Muslim countries, so you're at risk. And so praying, not only wise, but necessary. You know what else they did? They studied the culture. You know what else they did? They took political litmus papers, what was going on in those cities, what was going on in those countries. What do they eat? How do they dress? What is the type of people that is? And then when you went in, you also had an understanding of the people group. And you had an understanding about how they acted and what they did. And but if you just go, you know what? God woke me up in the middle of the night. I'm going over to the Middle East and I'm just going in. Well, you can. I get that. And Christians will do that. And they'll say, but see, I'm actually operating on faith. Well, if you avoid James and you don't put some works into this, and I'm going to say that if you're like, well, I'm just believing that God's going to show me the right one to vote for. Is that sometimes then Christians will take that and will go, well, that means I don't have anything to do with this,
Right.
and I'm not going to do my work. They have to do the work.
Yep.
We have to do the work.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, and you referenced it earlier in terms of the church at large. And I know I've talked with candidates who want to go into a church. Just, will your church host an event? Just let me use their facility.
Right.
And it's hard to find churches willing to do that. And you just think, like, are you not familiar with the reasons for America? Like, why our country was founded? It wasn't that long ago. It really wasn't, if you stop and think about it, in the grand scheme of the Earth's history.
Right. Right.
And our churches are so politically apathetic that they feel, for whatever reason, they can't even give a forum to politics. Well, politics is either going to follow the church or the church is going to follow politics, the culture, whatever you want to call it.
Right. Right.
And I've often thought, like, here in Des Moines, why are there not churches that, they encourage a pastor or a church itself or members of the church to open up their home to a legislator so that the legislator doesn't have to pay to stay, and you're keeping them in the body and you're keeping them with people who have the same kind of foundational beliefs. Just be active and engaged in the political arena, because God is supposed to be God of all. God wants every square inch.
Amen.
And we can't sit here and pretend it's every square inch but government.
Being a pastor in a ministry, I understand being nervous about having somebody come in at the time where you're preparing to minister one another and be the body, as Corinthians teaches us to do, to come together. However, to have a different time instead of go, yes,
right,
we want to have that discussion.
Right.
It should be happening in that place. And I'm going to tell you that I believe outright this, that Republicans, along with Democrats, have all ceded to the lie. They've conceded to the lie of separation of church and state. Well, you can't talk about that.
Yep.
Untrue. I had a strength conversation with a guy who kind of woke up and came against me a little bit. He was polite about it. He says, well, our church is about doing the important stuff, and that's populating heaven. Yeah. Well, I get that. Populate heaven. But if you shut your eyes, there will be no more ability to populate heaven.
Politics
easily.
Politics is what gives us the ability to worship in America. Freedom of religion, freedom to worship comes from the First Amendment. So whether the church likes it or not, the church's ability to be the church in our country relies to some level on the government. So if you want to be able to worship, we don't have to go back far in history. I screwed up because I said, do they not remember the reasons why the country was founded? We only have to go back 6 years ago to COVID, when the government had the power to shut down your church. Yes. So the church better wake up, and it better get involved in politics, because politics showed that it can shut down the church if it wants to. Whether you believe that was right, wrong, whatever, during COVID, at the end of the day, politics shuts your church down. So you better be willing to get involved in politics, because they'll shut it down again if they want to.
They absolutely will. That's a prophetic word, right? I mean, I'm saying that loosely, but that's an absolute fact that's going to happen. And when we don't get involved in that, here's what I see happening. One of the reasons the church is not going to get involved in that is because they were the loving ones that were compliant. And unfortunately, they loved compliance. And I'm going to say this very directly. They hated God. While they were loving compliance, they were turning their backs on the Lord. Because it didn't work that way with Paul when he went to prison. It didn't work that way with Peter when he went to prison. It didn't work that way with John when he went to prison. That is not how Jesus works. That is not how the body works. The body of Christ is, when the government comes in and says, you can't Jesus, that's a problem. But it also shows that we are sick as a church. Because when the government comes in and says, you can't Jesus, and Jesus-believing preachers go, you're right. What have we been teaching and preaching for the last 30 years in this country, except for prosperity and I'm blessed? And then when the government says, hey, you got to shut your doors, somebody who is filled with the Spirit of the living God because Jesus died for their sin, nothing rallies me more when somebody goes, well, you can't Jesus this. I'm going, obviously, you're not aware of the work of Christ in your life. And if pastors are saying, well, you need to do this, and we're going to shut down this, and Jesus says that we need to comply, and we saw this come across. I have been saying this for a very long time, and I continue to say it. This country remains under judgment not even necessarily because of the obvious ungodly principles that are going on. It's because the church is okay with it.
Yep.
The church is okay with the government coming in. We're going to tell you to do this. We're going to tell you to do this. And we're going to tell you to do this. And I'm telling you, I don't wish it on anybody to have to go into a country where that's already in place. But I would pray to God, everybody who's never been in a country, but that's actually the case, goes in there and finds out what that's like. Because we didn't just taste it, we saw it.
Yeah.
Just as you have said, the church is sick. They are becoming what I believe to be an antichrist movement to allow themselves to be shaped by society. And I think we're at risk even in this election cycle. And it's not going to be because of Republicans or because of Democrats. It's because the church is sick. And as a result of that, there's no righteousness being proclaimed and true mercy because of the holiness of God. Nobody's having a real encounter with God. They're not experiencing mercy because they don't think sin is a thing. And as a result of that, it actually affects how they vote or don't vote.
You've seen this the last couple of years. You've been coming down to the Capitol for subcommittees. When there are bills that I would argue are certainly in the interest of the church, you have pastors show up, give their pronouns and their garb, and make a religious argument using the Bible for the leftist, liberal, progressive, whatever you want to call it, position. And those pastors always outnumber the number of pastors who show up and give the conservative argument for positions. And to me, if that isn't a wake-up call to the pastors and the churches in the state of Iowa to say, wait a minute, why is it when there's a bill to protect kids from undergoing radical sex change surgeries, why are there more pastors showing up in support of sex changes for kids than those showing up to protect kids from those sex changes? Why are there more pastors showing up in support of, I mean, you could really go down the list, and the abortion pill is a great example. There was a subcommittee on the abortion pill bill earlier this year. It started with a self-proclaimed pastor who very well may be a pastor. I shouldn't say self-proclaimed, whatever. And they opened with a prayer to God and then advocated against the bill to get rid of the abortion pill. Where are the pastors who are there to advocate and protect babies? And why are they not showing up? Like, that's, to me, that's not a huge ask. Like, biblically, I feel like that's an easy case to make.
I do too. It is.
But you have to show up to make it. And our side isn't showing up to make it. And what do they say? The squeaky wheel gets the grease or something like that. Did I totally just butcher that? I don't know.
It is.
And the ones that show up typically win. And we aren't showing up.
I'm going to run one more line of why I think that's happening. Just as you say, there's a reason those pastors are unwilling to say it, or unwilling to say it in the pulpit, or unwilling to say it wherever they're saying it. The Bible doesn't say money is evil. The Bible does say the love of it is the root of all kinds or all sorts of evil. There's two money flows that are going on in this country right now, and it comes with socialism, by the way. Folks, listen up. If you don't think we're a socialist country at many levels, as a matter of fact, I've given us over to being a socialist country for quite a while in many ways, because that's how we operate from tax dollars. When the tax dollars come back to the people, you're entering into socialism. So here's what happens. Churches, which now receive tax funding, all kinds of churches, and especially these, as you say, self-proclaimed ones that go down and advocate for LGBTQ rights, that advocate for the, there's no spinning this. This is the murder of unborn children. That's all there is to it. That's all there is to it. And those pastors, all of those pastors, including conservatives who would say, well, I disagree with them fundamentally, but I'm not going to say anything. That's because you're getting money. And you're also afraid from the pulpit that if you say something that would cause your donors, who those people should be giving to God, not to a church, and just read your Bible. That's all there is to it. I'm not giving to a church. I'm giving to God. If you're giving, you're giving to God. And he's only asking for 10%. He owns it all. So you've got two money inflections here that actually have an impact, I believe, on people and churches. Churches are unwilling to preach holiness and forgiveness, only forgiveness and blessed. And that keeps the blessing coming. And as a result of that, they're not going to involve themselves in any kind of a politic that would create a problem around there. And along with that, you're going to get Joe Blow, Antichrist pastor down there, who's going to be twisting the scriptures as a different father speaks, called the father of lies. And they're going to do that because they too are receiving money and are influenced by the ability to receive that money to function their church. And as a result of that, it's interesting to me, the influence. When are people going to say, enough is enough of that? It's because they're getting a benefit somewhere that they're afraid to lose. Yeah. And as a result of that, people are stepping out of politics. Pastors aren't speaking boldly about it, or at least get involved at some level that either kicks butt and takes names at the pulpit or does it down at the state capitol. One way or the other, it's got to be happening.
You know what I think is the saddest part of all of that is I think the pastors on the left who show up because they genuinely believe in what they're standing for.
I agree, they do.
Which makes you wonder, where are the pastors who genuinely believe the opposite? I mean, I saw it in Sioux Center during the Sioux Center library thing, where a 13-year-old girl was allowed to check out a very sexually explicit book that had passages that are too much for Playboy. And there's one pastor in that entire town who spoke out against it. One. And then I do want to say this. Pastors, and I don't know who I am to try and lecture a pastor, so forgive me for that right away. But pastors need to not underestimate the power they have when they speak out in behalf of God. Because in Bondurant, where they were going to host a book club for 6th through 8th grade students using the book, This Book is Gay, which literally has an entire chapter on the ins and outs of gay sex. The first person who spoke at the library board meeting before that book club was supposed to meet was a pastor, Michael Damastis.
Yeah.
He spoke out powerfully as a pastor. And the one place where I've actually seen a library board hit at least pause and say, wait a minute, we will look at this, was Bondurant.
Really?
Yes.
That was the outcome of that. They did pause.
They at least paused, and we'll see what they end up deciding. But pastors who are on the side of the God of the Bible need to remember they are on the side of the God of the Bible. And when you're on his side, you're preaching and you're speaking, whether it's spiritually or politically, which I would argue at times it's both, from a very powerful position. In fact, I would argue you are speaking from a position in which you cannot lose. You cannot lose because God does not lose. And when you choose not to speak, you're silencing his voice, because his voice should be speaking through you, because you are supposed to be a shepherd. And I would just encourage pastors to reflect and think, I have the First Amendment right to preach in this country. Did God put me here to stay silent about the things that matter most? Because when you're looking at yourself and you know that kids in your community have unfettered access to sexually explicit content through their government, and you're not speaking out against that, you cannot make a biblical case for the opposite, which means you should be mandated to make the biblical case for the biblical case on this issue. And if I'm a pastor, I mean, you lose every fight you don't have.
Yeah.
And this one seems pretty winnable to me. But just don't doubt the power that you have.
That is an encouraging word that is necessary, because guilt of saying something that's true has been employed heavily in this country. If you speak the truth, guilt is all you're allowed to feel because of how you've made other people feel. And the culture has taken that. And pastors need to step away from guilt. We preach it here in this ministry all the time. Guilt is a horrible leader. It leads not well. And you need to step away from that. And you need to go out and say, this is right, this is wrong. And it doesn't have to be pretty. And I saw a large portion of Pastor Damastis speaking out there in Bondurant, right? And he still had some etiquette as a part of him. And I wanted to ring him up and say, hey, Michael, you could have barked a couple times too. I think you would have been just fine. Because people also don't understand that if it's not done by just speaking truth, and sometimes I think we always think, well, we're going to get it done because we're going to get it done calmly. I believe we're on the verge of a society where there's enough men out there that just go, we're not doing this horse game anymore. I'm not going to talk friendly anymore. This isn't going to happen anymore. I'm going to stand in front of the door of the ladies' room to make sure only ladies go in there, because this is the society that's beginning to boil up. And the church is going to need to get on its knees. Right now, I think we're in a pinnacle point as a country, as a state. The church is going to need to get on its knees and say, why have we doubted a God that doesn't lose? As you have said. Right. And then the legislature is going to need to get on its knees and say, why have we come against him in his nature and his character? I don't think that's ever going to happen. But the church is going to need this. And what we understand as being, people saying we're having a revival, or we're having I haven't seen the weight of that really. I see long worship conferences. I see long things like that. That's fine. But I'm critical of that, because revival has been and always will be a conviction that comes by God's power to the church that says you are wrong and it's time for you to get on your knees. I am willing to be merciful, but you must repent of this. And the church is in a bad way and needs to go there. Right. And in that place, then they'll go, that's God. I had left him. I forgot he doesn't lose. Yeah. I forgot he is the truth. I forgot he wins always. And I forgot the little thing he's asking me to do is to speak the truth, live the truth, love the truth, and teach the truth. Yeah. And we need that. We need that.
We need to not forget to, and I don't want to harken back to what happened 2 months ago or whatever it was when Don Lemon led the charge into the church in Minneapolis. But we have to recognize, and if we're not going to wake up and realize it, like through that event, that the church is weaker than it should be, then I don't know what it's going to be, because men in a church should not just sit there or stand there while kids in their church are crying. Women are fearful of what's happening. That should have been handled entirely different than it was by the men in that congregation, in my opinion. Yeah. And it's easy for me to say when I guess I'm not sitting there and, maybe I'm not feeling threatened or whatever. But I think at some point, like you said, the men have to step up and they have to say, no, enough is enough. Like this isn't happening here.
Right.
And it's not going to happen here. And then they need to make sure that it doesn't. Because right now that I think that's almost like the perfect microcosm for where we are in our country. Because the left is willing so much to do what they feel they have to do to win, that they walked into a worship service intentionally to disrupt it, to upset kids and women, and we did nothing about it. And who was it that founded this country? The Black Robed Regiment, pastors.
Yep.
Pastors in the Revolutionary War.
Yep.
If we had a Revolutionary War today, do we have pastors who would be willing to fight, let alone lead to win it?
I got a short list. I with you that is the perfect example. I think we need to go back to that, and I think we ought not criticize the Democrats or Don Lemon. I think when I saw that video, I went, none of those people coming into protest are an issue to me. The pastor is an issue to me, and every male man sitting in that pew, not standing up right now, and abruptly grabbing cloak and ushering them, which is a biblical thing to do, to usher, and usher them right out the door. How did that not happen?
Yeah.
How did that not happen? That is a reflection of the culture too. The church believes simply sit there and let women and children take it in front of their men.
Yep. Unbelievable.
That is unbelievable. And I hope we develop a culture of men, and I believe it's going to be men that are raised up. I believe it's the power of God and the Spirit of God that's calling on men to do that very thing. Pastor or not pastor, I'm a pastor. It's the last thing I ever think I ever wanted to be. And I want to encourage all the men to say, you have the authority of Christ to walk in that truth. Pastors definitely need to say it. And if you're not going to do it, men, if you go to a church and your pastor's not that guy, you need to become that guy. And he can be your pastor. That's fine. But you need to be the guy that pastor should be being. Yep. And that's what needs to happen in the exchange of the church. You need to be chatting with your pastor and say, Pastor, these things are wrong. And don't come quietly. Say, these things are wrong. We need to do something about this. And if the pastor says, well, we're taking a different line on this, then you need to depart from that pastor's ideals and take the line of truth. And you need to stand in that. I want to encourage you to do that. That's not an act of rebellion to serve right Christ. It is an act of truth within a church that needs a conviction by the Holy Spirit, and it's going to take the men to absolutely do that. Yep. Bro, I'm going to give you the last word if you like it.
No, I don't have anything to say other than this is like an awesome setup right here. It's been a while since I've been in here, and it's really exciting to uh, see the podcast grow, to see the guests that you're getting to come on. Um, every time I get to make an introduction or send somebody your way, I'm really glad and I'm really grateful, because I know that you're going to have actual deep, meaningful conversations with these people that actually matter. Like, this isn't just to scratch the surface. What's your favorite Thanksgiving tradition? Question to the candidates. But this like actually is like worldview stuff that actually matters. So I'm just super excited and super proud that I could be here, and that just to see it keep going and plugging away. And I know that we are in better hands as a state because of what you're doing, and I hope you keep doing it.
I appreciate that much. We are very thankful to be where we're at, the position that we're at, and the way God's blessing us and growing us that way. And I want to say this, the way God's called you and is using you, you're being obedient to him. It wouldn't be mattering what this podcast was doing. I know that to be true. And likewise, we try to hold that line. And you know what I know? We're on the same team.
Yeah.
And when I say on the same team, we are working together to see God, who causes all things together work for good for those who love him and call according to his purposes. And it is a privilege to know you and the Iowa Standard and what God is moving you into. And we continue to say, look, wherever you get your news, please go to the Iowa Standard and find out information that you had no idea that you could get right there, because yours is close. It's close to the heart. It's close to what's actually going on down at the state capitol. And the articles, and I've watched it. You've posted articles by left-leaning Democrats that want to say that they're doing, and you don't run around going, I need to be balanced. I need to be fair. You're a source of truth where people can get that information and have that understanding and be encouraged in that and be motivated in that.
Yep.
So, Jacob, thanks for coming in, even as tough as it was to get here today. I appreciate it immensely. It has been a long time. Thank you so much. We appreciate you very much.
Thanks.
And for everybody out there who's been a part of the podcast, we thank you, and I hope you've enjoyed this. You're going to want to like and share this. Jacob Hall has an excellent analysis on what's going on politically. You're going to want to dig in, get more information that you need on all of these candidates. It's going to be an important primary, and we're asking you to do more than just pray, but find out